Welcome to Podkey NFL, where today it's Caleb Williams, defensive trends, and some very weird team marketing ideas. A lot of the league's big questions right now come down to adaptation. Quarterbacks are refining, defenses are catching up, offenses are changing shape, and apparently some teams should maybe hire ad agencies with less caffeine. Caleb Williams is one of the more interesting development stories because the raw numbers still leave room for debate, but the overall trajectory is clearly up. The accuracy conversation is really about placement as much as completion percentage. He's been willing to fit throws into really tight, low-probability windows, back shoulder balls or passes that arrive just before a defender can break them up, and that can produce completions without actually giving the receiver much margin. So the issue isn't just whether the pass avoids the defender. It's whether the ball arrives in a spot that creates a clean catch window and lets the receiver win comfortably. Williams completed 58% of his passes in 2025, which is well short of his coach's 70% target, but that number also lives next to a league-leading 42 throwaways. That matters, because it suggests some of the lower completion rate is tied to deliberate risk management and avoiding negative plays rather than pure inaccuracy. If you adjust his numbers to more normal league throwaway and drop rates, the completion rate nudges closer to 60%, which still isn't elite, but it gives a better picture of the decision-making pattern. And the encouraging part is that his rookie to sophomore jump was real. Better sack avoidance, more downfield success, and a climb from the lower tier to top 10 territory in EPA and success rate. That's why the developmental comparisons are interesting. The Josh Allen mention is about how big early career growth can happen, but the more grounded takeaway comes from guys like Jared Goff or Jordan Love, where steady refinement, daily quarterback coach work, and better command of the structure can add up fast. He doesn't need some superhero leap. If the mechanics and placement keep getting polished, and the decisions keep getting a little cleaner, there's a very believable path to another step forward. Cincinnati's offense is another good example of a team that may need to widen the menu a bit. The Bengals have been very gun-heavy. They lean into inside zone, and they've used a lot of 12 personnel, which can make the whole thing feel narrower and more predictable than the talent says it should. That structure can limit how much variety you get from under-center looks and from play action, and those details matter because defenses are so fast at diagnosing repeated pictures now. What makes this worth revisiting is that the run game actually found life late in the year. In the second half of the season, they posted a 45% rushing success rate, and Chase Brown finished top 10 in rushing success. So there's evidence that once the personnel and blocking structure settled, it worked. The really eye-catching detail is that their under-center runs already produced the league's best explosive rate at 11.5%. So there's a pretty straightforward argument here. Get under center more often, create more explosive runs, and make play action more convincing and more dangerous off it. This doesn't mean throwing out what they do well. It means making the offense less easy to map before the snap. League-wide, the bigger backdrop is that the offense-only era doesn't look quite as absolute as it did a few years ago. From about 2016 through 2022, elite offensive efficiency felt like the cover charge for a real playoff run. That was the stretch shaped by the Shanahan and McVay influence, the Mahomes era arriving, and a lot of advanced metrics reinforcing just how overwhelming top offenses had become. But recent champions have pushed back on that story. The 2023 Chiefs were the first Super Bowl winner since 2015 to finish outside the top 10 in offensive EPA, and 2 of the last 3 champions had offenses outside the top 10. That points to a rebalancing more than a full revolution. You still want a good offense, obviously, but it looks more possible again for a defense to carry substantial weight deep into January. Part of that shift is tactical. The old offensive easy buttons aren't as easy anymore. In 2020, 11 teams got to a 50% success rate using motion with condensed formations at the snap. In the latest season, only 2 teams hit that mark. Defenses adjusted by living in more too-high safety looks before the snap. In 2016, only 1 team used that look on 350 pass attempts. By 2025, 11 teams did. So the answers that used to create free space don't create quite as much free space now. That same adjustment cycle helps explain why the run game matters more again. The Eagles' 2022 Super Bowl team had the league's 7th best rushing attack, and teams like the Bills have leaned intentionally into high-level rushing offense to take some of the week-to-week volatility off their quarterback. That's not an anti-quarterback argument. Elite quarterbacks are still enormously valuable. It's more that a team with an above-average fringe top 10 quarterback can still win the whole thing if the defense is elite. The margin for error is smaller, but the path exists. And the cap side is a little less restrictive than it used to be. Modern contract structuring gives teams more flexibility, so even giant quarterback extensions are not automatically roster killers. The other big roster lesson is drafting. Recent champions leaned heavily on recent draft classes for core contributors, and teams like Seattle and Philadelphia keep showing how far you can go when the offensive cap spend stays relatively modest and the young talent is real. That's the sustainable model. More teams are chasing now. Pay the stars you have to pay, hit on the draft, and let the cheap talent do serious work. If you want a person-sized example of this era of adjustment, Patrick Graham is a good one. His defenses have changed pretty dramatically from year to year, from a blitz-oriented 2024 approach to a much more stack-box, zone-heavy 2025 version. That kind of flexibility matters because it shows he's not locked into one favorite answer. He's willing to build around personnel and opponent tendencies. He's also managed top-half defensive DVOA with limited talent, which is why people look at a team like the Steelers and see a potential fit. The idea there would be bringing back more man coverage, more pressure, and more disguise, all in service of maximizing players like Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson instead of making them play in a box that doesn't really fit. And then there's the completely different category of NFL content: fake team marketing campaigns, which honestly tell you a lot about how each franchise feels. The Cowboys get an Earn Back Your Trust redemption campaign built around recent defensive trades. The Broncos go with a goofy no-bun KFC-style riff about trimming down around core players. And the Patriots get a Wizard of Oz line asking fans to ignore the man behind the curtain. The Bengals are basically told to put Skyline Chili at the center of the whole operation, which is either smart local branding or a cry for help, maybe both. The Ravens get a Red Bull-style wings metaphor around generational talent. The Steelers get a last-mile transition message after long coaching stability. And the Falcons lean all the way into self-deprecating stock car energy with drive fast and turn left. Then it gets even more specific. The Cardinals plant trees for your tomorrow. The Seahawks brand themselves like an AI productivity company. And the 49ers become a hyper-optimized wellness empire. Which, to be fair, does sound a little like where football branding has been headed anyway. That's the roundup for today on Podkey NFL. The big theme is pretty simple. The league keeps correcting itself, and the teams that read those corrections fastest usually matter longest. Thanks for listening. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.